Good morning. The committee meets today to consider the nomination of General David Allvin to be the next Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force. General, congratulations on your nomination, and I'd like to thank your wife, Gina, and your children, Francesca, Grant, and Reagan, for their many years of support for your service. General, you are extremely well qualified to serve as Chief of Staff for the Air Force. As the current Vice Chief, you have helped lead the Air Force through a critical period of modernization, and you are well positioned to continue the service's progress. You bring extensive leadership experience to this role, having served at every level from squadron to wing and across the globe, including in combat. You also have an important strategic perspective from your experiences on the Joint Staff. If confirmed, you will lead at a momentous time. Air power is key to our strategic competition with China and other adversaries. And the entire Joint Forces relies on the capabilities of the Air Force every day. This is a challenging mission, as the service must strike a balance between supporting its global operations while providing adequate resources to modernize its aircraft and platforms. To achieve this mission, the Air Force has increased investments in technologies that will help shape the future battle space. In particular, the Air Force's success will be determined by its ability to manage and control data. The development of the Joint All-Domain Command and Control, or JADC2, program will help detect, analyze, and act on information quickly using automation, artificial intelligence, and predictive analysis. For the Air Force specifically, the development of the Air Battle Management Capability, or ABMC, will help the service transition its ground-moving target indication systems from aircraft platforms to space systems. When fully developed, these technologies will help our forces acquire targets as early as possible and rapidly deliver information to the best operator on air, land, or sea. General, I would like to know how you would plan to continue resourcing and evolving these cutting-edge technologies. The U.S. Air Force remains the most capable air power in the world. However, in most recent budget requests, the Air Force requested to retire or realign various elements of the force, with a net reduction of roughly 214 aircraft in fiscal year 2024. This would have included reducing or altering the force structure for various fighter, transport, logistics, ISR, and training aircraft. Any proposal of this sort deserves careful consideration, but discussions must be had about whether these proposed retirements are necessary or appropriate in the near term. We also need to evaluate our domestic industrial base to avoid making short-sighted decisions that undercut our production and manufacturing capabilities. General, I would like to know how you would approach these and other proposed retirements and how you would plan to adjust the force structure. The Air Force must also adapt to the cyber threat environment. I understand the Air Force has struggled, as have other services, with its cyber readiness. This shortfall is due primarily to difficulties in training and retaining cyber personnel with specialized skills. The private sector has realized the immense value of our cyber operators, and it's offering them very high compensation to leave the military. The Air Force must adjust accordingly by providing a creative combination of incentives to compete for and retain these personnel. This should include competitive compensation and a professionalized military career path. And General, I'd like to know how you would plan to address this challenge. Finally, as we anticipate the challenges of future conflicts, I'm encouraged by the Air Force's renewed focus on contested logistics. Recognizing the need for more resilient and agile logistics in regions like the Indo-Pacific, the Air Force is developing a concept for distributed operations called Agile Combat Employment, or ACE. This concept would include air operations from many small airfields throughout the Pacific Island chains. General, I'd like to know your thoughts on how the Air Force should develop this concept further and how it can approach contested logistics support more broadly. The challenges I have just discussed are complex and growing, and the next Chief of Staff of the Air Force will play a fundamental role in meeting them. Thank you, General, for your willingness to lead at this critical time, and I look forward to your testimony. Unfortunately, Senator Wicker could not join us today. He is suffering from the flu. He has asked that I include his statement for the record, and without objection, Senator Wicker's statement will include it in the record. At this time, General, we would ask for your opening statement.
Chairman Reed, distinguished members of this committee, I'm grateful and truly humbled at the opportunity to appear before you this morning. Let me start by expressing my sincere appreciation for the continued support and advocacy of this body for our United States Air Force, its airmen, and their families. I assure you they continue to prove themselves more than worthy of that support, and our nation should be proud of each and every one of them. I'd like to briefly acknowledge my amazing family, who both inspire me and remind me of the why behind what I do. Gina, my incredible wife of over 27 years, is here with me, and our three wonderful children, Francesca, Grant, and Reagan, are away at college. Gina is the heart and soul of our family, and when I look to the world through the eyes of our very talented kids, I recommit myself to excellence. Because I believe if this nation continues to provide the freedoms and opportunities we enjoy, they will undoubtedly make the world a better place. I'm the eighth of 9 children, and though both my father, a veteran of World War II, and my mother have passed, they are looking down with pride at their legacy. My sisters and brothers are the most amazing people you'll ever meet. They are as selfless and empathetic as they are talented. I would like to thank President Biden, Secretary Austin, and Secretary Kendall for their confidence and support in nominating me to be the next Air Force Chief of Staff. I would also like to thank General C.Q. Brown, Jr., our current Chief of Staff, and, pending confirmation, our next Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for his outstanding work in leading our airmen for the past 3 years. It's been an honor to be his wingman, and if confirmed, I look forward to continuing to work alongside him as a member of the Joint Chiefs. Chairman and committee members, I believe the opportunity to be the next Air Force Chief of Staff comes at a very important time in history, and I fully appreciate and embrace the weight of what is at stake. Our nation is coming to grips with the rapid pace of change that is upon us, and with those intending to act against our national interests while aggressively seeking the means to do so. America's national security focus is crucial as we navigate this new global landscape with our allies and partners, especially as opportunities for distraction and confusion are increasingly exploited. I've spent the last 10 years of my career doing the business of strategy, policy, and planning, equally split between the Joint Force and our United States Air Force. I can say with confidence that alignment across our Department of Defense is the best I have seen over that decade. Our current national defense strategy and our maturing joint warfighting concept are instructive in the development of our Air Force concepts and capabilities. If confirmed, I will focus on continuing the integration of these concepts and sustaining the alignment as we modernize the force. Our Air Force must transform to adapt to the changing character of war, requiring tough investment choices. The balance of risk over time to ensure sufficient readiness today and tomorrow demands constant attention. If confirmed, I pledge continued collaboration with this body as the Air Force analyzes and develops courses of action to best pursue our national security objectives. Above all, I believe the clear advantage this nation has over potential adversaries is the qualities inherent in the American people. I believe there is plenty of patriotism, desire to serve as part of a team, and drive for purpose-filled life in our population to fill our Air Force ranks. If confirmed, I pledge to continue to fine-tune the way we discover and reach out to those with the competencies and the desire to join our ranks. Just as important, I will continue to ensure those on our Air Force team want to stay by focusing on improving quality of life, quality of service, and by fortifying an environment where all of our airmen can achieve their potential. It is truly an honor to be nominated as the 23rd Air Force Chief of Staff. If confirmed, I look forward to working with this committee and the Congress to ensure the United States Air Force is organized, trained, and equipped to fly, fight, and win with air power, anytime, anywhere. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, General. I have a series of questions that are posed to each nominee. Please respond appropriately. Have you adhered to applicable laws and regulations governing conflicts of interest?
I have, Senator.
Have you assumed any duties or taken any actions that would appear to presume the outcome of the confirmation process?
No, Senator.
Exercising our legislative and oversight responsibilities makes it important that this committee, its subcommittees, and other appropriate committees of Congress receive testimonies, briefings, reports, records, and other information from the executive branch on a timely basis. Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify before this committee when requested?
I do, Senator.
Do you agree, when asked before this committee, to give your personal views, even if your views differ from the administration?
I do, Senator.
Do you agree to provide records, documents, and electronic communications in a timely manner when requested by this committee, its subcommittees, or other appropriate committees of Congress, and to consult with the requester regarding the basis of any good faith delay or denial in providing such records?
I do.
Will you ensure that your staff complies with deadlines established by this committee for the production of reports, records, and other information, including timely responding to hearing questions for the record?
I will.
Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and briefers in response to congressional requests?
I will.
Will those witnesses and briefers be protected from reprisal for their testimony or briefings?
They will.
Thank you very much, General. As I mentioned in my opening statement, General, the Air Force plans to reduce a substantial number of aircraft, and included in these aircraft are intelligence and reconnaissance systems, and they include AWACS, JSTARS, U-2, and Global Hawk. Do you and the Air Force have a sufficient capability to support combatant commanders for ISR with the requirement of all these systems before replacement capability is online?
Mr. Chairman, first, thank you for that question. This is probably one of the more vexing ones that we face as we try and balance the readiness today with the readiness tomorrow. With respect to the capabilities that we currently have to do ISR, ground moving target indicators, air moving target indications, we're finding that those platforms have served us well in the past, but they're decreasing in their relevance. And so as we transition to move to those platforms and systems that will be more relevant into the future, we are working to ensure that those that we retain, we keep as ready as possible. As they continue to age, we need to understand which of those we need to divest, because the cost of just keeping them flying or operating, combined with their decreased relevance, actually decreases our ability to deter and defeat into the future. So going into the future, as we develop those capabilities and the systems in the future, we will work with this body. And if I'm confirmed, I will pledge to commit to working with that responsible transition to maintain deterrence and readiness today as we transition to the systems of tomorrow.
A related aspect to this question is that many of these ISR platforms are drones that are operated on the ground. And years ago, we requested, then required the Air Force to include non-officer pilots. The model that we hope to build on was the model of the Army helicopters and warrant officers. We have had a legislative proposal this year to eliminate the mandate, but it makes sense to me to develop a class of operators, whether they be senior non-commissioned officers or warrant officers, that can fly these aircraft, specialize in these aircraft, not be diverted to professional schools as a commissioned officer would. Do you have any views, and would you continue to pursue this effort?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's an important question for a couple of reasons. First of all, we certainly respect the effort that we have taken in order to integrate enlisted pilots into our remotely piloted aircraft. The manner in which we did it was through our RQ-4 fleet. And with the diminishing number of that fleet, we had an increasingly decreasing size of that career field. And so therefore, as the career field shrank, it left less and less opportunities for our enlisted aviators to have a path to promotion. However, to your point about having sort of a technical track or a warrant officer equivalent, I would say that as we look to the future, one of the things we need to do in our force design is to optimize our ability to put the right airmen in the right weapon system and the right system to ensure that we can continue to dominate into the future. As we look at those force designs, our human capital is one of those things we will evaluate. And as we look to those human-machine teamings and the future of manned, unmanned platforms, we will certainly look at that as part of our human capital and force design as to what makes sense. I look forward to working this body if I'm confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me now recognize Senator Fisher for her questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, General Allvin. Nice to see you, and congratulations to you and your family on this nomination. As we talked about in our meeting, the Sentinel emplacement is the largest and the most complex project that the department has undertaken in decades. What efforts do you think should be taken to ensure that this program remains on schedule?
Well, Senator, thank you very much. I appreciate that question because we need to keep reminding ourselves that one of the most sacred missions that we have is strategic deterrence. And maintaining that reliable and effective nuclear deterrent is part and parcel to anything we do as a Department of Defense and securing the nation. As you well know, and we discussed in your office, this Sentinel program is part of one of the most complex yet important transitions and recapitalizations of our ICBM fleet. To your question about how do we ensure it remains on track, Senator, I think one of the most important things that we can do is vigilance to ensure that as we see external factors that might potentially provide challenges or opportunities to the cost, schedule, and performance of that program, that we need to make sure we communicate with this body and collaborate to understand if there are opportunities that we can help to maintain it on track and have the warfighter get the requirement on time. And one of those things is the recent acquisition adjustment of an acquisition strategy to look for those things we might be able to decouple and pull to the left. But those are the things I would say vigilance and collaboration are the way that we can ensure that that program remains on track. And if I'm confirmed, I will pledge to do so, both counts.
I appreciate that because a lot of times there's outside, I'd call them outside pressures, whether they're macroeconomic pressures that we're looking at. So I hope that we can continue to have a good discussion and an open discussion when you are seeing pressures like that. The Department of the Air Force also has a role in a significant number of systems that comprise our NC3. And while NC3 doesn't always receive the focus as we look at modernization, it is extremely important, as you know. In order that this project also remains on schedule, it's going to be vital that it does, so that we can maintain our nuclear deterrent. If confirmed, will you commit to working with this committee closely on these efforts?
Senator, absolutely.
Thank you. Also, we're looking at technology gaps, because technology gaps are always a concern whenever we're upgrading or transitioning to new or replacement platforms. Ensuring that mission capability does not falter can sometimes prove delicate to navigate, especially when we're looking at several factors like budget constraints, like the macroeconomic stresses that we face, changes that we sometimes see in the program from the initial mission. So, General, how should the Air Force plan to integrate new technology systems and into existing infrastructure and operations so that you can maximize the effectiveness of those?
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the question. I think there's several depths to that question because we do need to integrate new technologies into existing equipment. I think many of the headlines that we get are wanting to modernize and develop new systems. However, we still have many capable systems. We just need to integrate the technologies to make sure they remain relevant. And I think part of that is ensuring that we know exactly what we need for keeping that particular platform relevant. And as we do that, we bake in things like cyber resilience and cyber protection, because a lot of those systems weren't originally imagined and designed when the cyber threat was as great as it was. So I think making sure from the start we have cyber resiliency and cyber protection baked into those so we don't add increased risk to those particular platforms will be key, and if confirmed, that will be definitely something I will be advocating for.
That was going to be the second part, and it is the second part of my question to you. How do those cyber threats pose challenges to the integration that we're looking at? Can you give just a couple examples in this setting, please?
Well, Senator, I think an example I would give is many of the legacy systems that we had weren't designed with that cyber protection, and so therefore there are vulnerabilities in the systems themselves. And we are working a twofold solution to that. The first is, as I mentioned, the baked-in resiliency and what we call our Cyber Resilience Office for Weapons Systems. That's to make sure anything we do, the software and new platform has that baked in. But we have also looked at something through a project we had, Task Force Sentinel Stand, and that was really to look at where those vulnerabilities exist in the systems that were built before the cyber protections were baked in and we understood the nature of the threat. So we're evaluating, first of all, what to look at in our legacy systems, and then second, we're putting sensors on those so we can ensure that we can see, because you can't defend what you can't see.
So it's important always to understand the threat.
Absolutely, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator Shaheen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, General Allvin. Congratulations to you and to Gina and your whole family on your nomination. We hope that the holds that are on general officers will be released soon so that you'll actually be able to assume the role that I believe you'll be confirmed for. There's been a lot of discussion about the potential for Congress to not pass a continuing resolution to keep the government open or the budget bills that we need to pass by October the 1st. Can you describe what you think the impact on the Air Force would be if we are in either a shutdown or a long-term continuing resolution?
Thank you, Senator. That's a particularly important question because every day when I go to work, when I work for Secretary Kendall, who is laser focused on getting to the future, our focus is on how fast we can get there, understanding the sense of urgency, and that, as our Secretary said, war isn't inevitable, but we need to prepare for it as though it is. And so as we do that, every day that we don't have a predictability in our budget or we can't advance those modernization activities and the RDT&E and the science and technology advancement of those, we're falling behind. So while on the surface we keep the government running, we keep the trains running on time, as they would say, but the sort of underneath the surface, we are falling behind, and what we don't want to do is look several years in the future and find the accumulation of those means that we've fallen behind and put ourselves at a disadvantage. So the on-time appropriations help us buy those long lead items, continue the momentum that we're building after we've identified the capabilities we need.
And can you also talk about what the impact is on our adversaries of a government shutdown, of our inability to get a budget that keeps the military operating?
Well, Senator Shaheen, that's a challenging question to answer because it really goes into what we think are in the minds of our potential adversaries. However, when one can see the actions, if I were in their seats, I would look at that as the ability for us to perhaps, if I was an adversary to the United States or potential adversary, for us to be able to continue to gain momentum and move faster. And that's what, as the United States, one thing we do not want to do is encourage potential adversaries to think that when they have differences in national security or national interests, that they can take it into conflict and win. That's what we need to prevent.
Thank you, I agree. I appreciated the opportunity we had to meet, and one of the issues we talked about was the KC-46, the tanker, which is no longer new, but still dealing with a number of issues to make it fully operational. And the first tankers were delivered to the 157th Refueling Wing in 2019. We still have a remote vision system that is not fully operational, and we're talking about not having that fully operational until 2025, so fully 6 years after the first tankers were delivered. How do we avoid that happening again in the future? And how do we do everything possible to continue to move forward that schedule for getting the RVS system operational?
Well, thank you, Senator. First, I would echo the importance of rapid global mobility and what it means to our Air Force, and really what makes us the best Air Force on the planet and enables our nation to be able to respond in a manner we wouldn't otherwise be able to, and I think it's critical. So the recapitalization of our air refueling fleet and enabling us to maintain rapid global mobility is absolutely essential, and I will continue to put focus on that. With respect to the KC-46, it is proving itself to be a very capable aircraft. I take your point that we wanted those systems to be working the first time out of the chute. We are putting the pressure and continuing to work with Boeing to ensure that those fixes, those software fixes, are making it the very, very best capability it can be. In the meantime, through our Major Commander General Minahan from Air Mobility Command, he has authorized the interim capability releases that enable us to still refuel basically all of the fleet of receivers that we have, with the exception of the A-10. And so it is functioning very well, but not as well as it could. So, Senator Sheen, on this particular program, it's just, once again, maintaining vigilance and maintaining pressure, if you will, to ensure that those capabilities are delivered. I believe as we move forward into future modernized platforms, I think we're learning lessons about maybe owning more of the tech base, about owning government's reference architecture, and those sort of things that will allow us to continue to leverage the influence that we might have throughout operations and sustainment and make it more affordable. Thank you.
Well, rest assured, I will continue to raise the question until it's all fixed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sheen. Senator Cotton, please.
General Allvin, thank you for your service. Congratulations on your nominations. Congratulations to your family as well, and thank them for their service. And thanks to all the airmen who you've been representing up here in your current role and who you would represent in your new role if confirmed. Speaking of confirmation, since Senator Shaheen talked about the current situation on the floor, I just want to say that we could also easily confirm you if Chuck Schumer would get off the dime and shows that he actually cares about supporting our men and women in uniform. Of course, we voted before on general officer nominations. We voted just a few years ago for Mark Milley to be chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And you may say that's something special, but apparently Chuck Schumer doesn't think it's too special because he has said he's not going to have that vote for C.Q. Brown. Maybe my Democratic colleagues can go talk to Chuck Schumer, as they're always encouraging us to go talk to Tommy Tuberville. Second, my Democratic colleagues just a few years back required us to vote on the shift of H.R. McMaster, who was only a 3-star general, not a 4-star general. You demanded that we voted on H.R. McMaster simply because he was going from one job to the next job. So I don't think it'd be too much to ask for the Senate to spend a little bit of time confirming 4-star general officers to positions like Chief of Staff of the Air Force or Commandant of the Marine Corps or Chief of Naval Operations. That said, General Allvin, you said something I want to quibble with just a little bit. You said you don't think war is inevitable. I have to say, if you look over the stretch of human history, you have to conclude that war is, in fact, inevitable. But in a paradoxical way, it seems that no specific or particular war is inevitable. And I think that's what you and Secretary Kendall are driving at about China, right? Even if war is inevitable in the human condition, a war between the United States and China is not inevitable. Is that right?
Senator, that's better put than I put it.
So the reason I stress that is because if this or that particular war does occur, it's not because it was inevitable, it's because it was the result of poor choices made by one side or the other or both. And I want to look into one choice in particular that we may be making that could tempt China to think they might win a war. Air superiority is critical in modern warfare, is that correct?
Senator, that is absolutely correct.
And that's a lesson that we've seen in Ukraine in particular. Russia expected to have air superiority in just a matter of days. They still have not established air superiority. What has that meant for them on the battlefield?
Well, Senator, I think that we've seen that they are struggling in places where they did not anticipate that they would struggle. And also, it tends to go towards the Ukrainians' innovation and their ability to adapt on the fly. But it's clear that the Russians were not making the progress that they had intended.
And is it fair to say that air superiority in the Western Pacific, especially in a conflict over Taiwan, would be as important or even more important than it has been in the land war in Ukraine?
Senator, I believe that to be the case.
Okay, thank you. So with all that in mind, the Air Force has stated repeatedly for the last few years that to meet our modernization requirement, it has to accept risk. That's a common phrase we hear, accept risk to divest combat aircraft. But at the same time, China is rapidly expanding its Air Force. So I share Secretary Kendall's reported concerns about the ability of the Air Force to face China tomorrow because I think we've had to accept a lot of near-term risk. Would increased funding for the Air Force necessarily decrease the risk we're having to accept in terms of near-term combat capability?
Well, Senator, thank you for that. No, very, very well laid out question. I believe I would say that in the case of air superiority, as we see it in the future, we look back on how we've achieved it in the past, and I believe that is not going to be the way that we're going to be able to obtain air superiority, which is over large swaths for large periods of time. However, as we look towards modernization, we understand having the right capability in the right amount at the right time, synchronized with the joint fight, is going to be the key to air superiority in the future. So maybe regional, maybe temporal, but it's going to be just as important. And so as we look towards modernizing, we're looking toward keeping the most relevant platforms. And unfortunately, we still have some platforms that are marginally relevant, but will not likely be difference makers in a China fight. So those tough decisions that we're making or proposing to the Congress are those to be able to divest those that will be less effective today, and the money that we spend on trying to keep them airborne is money that will not be spent on being able to develop the capabilities of tomorrow. So additional resources obviously would alleviate some of that tension, but we are still constantly making those decisions and balancing today's risk.
So some savings, I understand, from that divestiture, and that we can reinvest in the kind of platforms we need. But additional money appropriated beyond that for, say, F-35s or collaborative combat aircraft or munitions would no doubt help establish greater likelihood of air superiority in the Western Pacific, correct?
That's correct, Senator, assuming we can get them in the timely manner.
One final question. Another part of air superiority, especially in facing a threat like China, is our allies. As we've discussed, we're about to have foreign military training for the F-35s for allies at Ebbing Air Force Base. Can I get your commitment that, if confirmed, you'll do everything in your power to ensure that project moves forward on a timely basis, and we have the Sound of Freedom back in the River Valley next fall, 2024?
Senator, you do that commitment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Cotton. Senator Hirono, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations, General. It was good to meet with you, and I thank your family also for their service. I asked the following two initial questions of every nominee before any of my committees, and I will ask you the following two questions. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No, Senator.
The Air Force is now the acquisition authority for cruise missile defense of the homeland. Meanwhile, the Space Force is the global sensor manager, and the Missile Defense Agency continues to oversee system development. To ensure clarity and collaboration, I work to require a report on the roles and responsibilities for missile defense in this year's Senate-passed NDAA. And the department needs to develop a plan for cruise missile defense of Hawaii to include hypersonic missiles, which is why I work to include a strategy for integrated air and missile defense in the Indo-Pacific in our NDAA. General Allvin, if confirmed, will you work with Indo-PACOM as they lead the development of this strategy, the strategy being an integrated air and missile defense in the Indo-Pacific AOR?
Senator, I absolutely will. And your point about the homeland defense being, Hawaii is not only the lead point into the Indo-Pacific, but it is on the frontiers of our homeland defense. And so, Senator, I will work with you on.
You may know that I've been asking about the adequacy of missile defense for Hawaii for, it seems like a number of years, and that's why now that the Air Force has a particular responsibility, I'd like to be assured that all of this is being integrated. Although Pearl Harbor Hickam is a joint installation led by the Navy, the disrepair of the Hickam Airfield parking ramp endangers Air Force readiness. And we talk about the importance of air superiority, and I would say that we should have ramps that are in working order. General Allvin, if confirmed, how will you ensure infrastructure across the Pacific supports the Air Force's power projection requirements?
Well, Senator, you couldn't be more right in ensuring that we have the power projection capability from Hawaii, from Guam, from other areas, and our overall infrastructure priorities remain the nuclear recapitalization infrastructure, and then after that, our support for INDOPACOM infrastructure. Working with the Navy, we will continue to, as they develop their programs, to ensure that we articulate those requirements and link arms as the budgets make their way through to make sure that those investments they have planned make it through to execution.
As I mentioned when we met, that I've physically went to see the parking ramp that at Hickam Airfield, and I saw a chart that showed all these red areas where a plane could not be parked if it's loaded to any particular extent. That is very unacceptable, and I'd like to see the Navy put the renovation and the repairs of the ramp infrastructure as a priority, and I would expect that you would support that. And there was a typhoon recently that devastated the Air Force facilities in Guam this past May, and I urge you to provide the accurate cost estimates and justifications that Congress needs to support the climate-resilient repair of Andersen Air Force Base. I think it is going to be in possibly in the billions of what happened at Andersen Air Force, so we'd like to see the figures. By around the end of this year, the fuel at Red Hill will be removed and strategically dispersed across the Pacific Theater. Though both tactically and environmentally prudent, it does raise new logistic challenges. General, how is the Air Force managing its strategic fuel laydown for the Pacific with the closure of Red Hill?
Senator, thank you for that. When we look at the logistics laydown, specifically to your point on fuel, this is something we work with the Defense Logistics Agency, INDOPACOM, as well as the Joint Staff and U.S. Transcom, and understanding where the best location for those storage facilities are, and ensuring that as we do that, we work closely with allies and partners to ensure that there's safe storage, there's accessible storage that will enable us to not only leverage them in peacetime, but should conflict arise in our employment of agile combat employment, that we are able to access those in a safe and responsive manner.
So you are engaging in those kinds of discussions now, because we're talking about Red Hill and 100 million gallons of fuel that now have to be dispersed elsewhere. So you are having those discussions now, and at some point, I don't know if in this setting, you can describe for us how the fuel laydown is going to take place throughout the Indo-Pacific area.
Yes, ma'am, Senator, we will.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rono. Senator Rounds, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Allvin, first of all, I want to thank you and your family for your service to our country. When you're deployed, they are too. And when you're separated, it's not just you that's separated, it's them as well. And we appreciate that sacrifice that the family has made. Thank you. General Allvin, I also understand that the DOD and the NTIA study on the 3.1 to 3.45 gigahertz portion of the spectrum has been completed. It is being reviewed at senior levels in the department and will be published later this month. While it is not exactly as explicitly protective of the lower 3 gigahertz band that I think the facts merit, it is nevertheless important that I believe anyway, that the report suggests that it does not provide the commercial interest the carte blanche that they wanted to auction off this portion of the spectrum. As such, I anticipate members and their staffs will soon be hearing from the industry about their desire to move forward with some sort of a scheme despite the findings of the report. I remain unsure if the industry still does not know or just doesn't care about the national security ramifications that are at stake with regard to this part of the spectrum. I bring this up to set the stage and encourage you. It is imperative that you be forthright and clear on the impact that auctioning off the lower 3 gigahertz band of the spectrum would have on the Air Force's capabilities where you operate, and that the cost of developing the new systems could be substantial. Every senior DoD official that I have questioned this year has expressed concerns about sharing this portion of the spectrum due to the critical DoD systems that use and operate on it. General, if the study confirms the concerns expressed by DoD thus far, what would be your advice to the President and Congress?
Well, Senator, I appreciate that, and you can add me to the list of senior DoD officials who has concerned about the national security implications of this. And the reasons are really twofold. these are not only embedded in the systems that we need to operate, and we do not see technology that would enable us to share spectrum. So if the decisions were either to vacate or to preserve, the option to vacate would not only be cost prohibitive in my estimation, but it would not enable us to do the training and the testing that we need to do to maintain the readiness in this environment where we see an increasingly aggressive and assertive potential adversary. So I would say my advice would be to preserve the spectrum in the areas that we have it so we can maintain our readiness against potential adversaries.
Would it be fair to say that our adversaries would love to see us in a position where this portion of the spectrum was being depleted from DoD use?
Again, Senator, I can't get in their minds, but if I were our adversaries, I would certainly see that as an advantage.
Thank you. General Allvin, I was just out at Ellsworth Air Force Base 2 weeks ago. I was very impressed with Colonel Oakley, Chief Rasmussen, and the airmen of the 28th Bomb Wing as they prepare for the B-21 mission. Given the crucial role that the B-21 will play in our defense, both as a pillar of the nuclear triad and as a crucial component of our conventional forces in a near-peer fight, we need as many of these precious assets as we can get our hands on. Can you describe how important the B-21 will be to the conventional joint force fight in a highly contested environment like the Western Pacific?
Senator, first of all, thank you for recognizing the great leadership. We spent a lot of time talking about platforms and systems, but it's obviously the airmen that really make it all tick, and that's a fantastic leadership team that they have.
I agree.
But with respect to the B-21, Senator, I'm personally very excited about this program and the way that it was developed and what it's turning out to be in its performance, and cost schedule and performance adherence, all of these things. But more importantly, for what it's going to bring to us. When we look at the conventional fight in the Indo-Pacific, if that happens, we need all of the systems to be survivable. They need to be connected. They need to be able to be persistent. And the B-21 provides not only all of that, but also a great long-range strike capability. And as we look forward in our force design on which things are going to be the more important, getting that balance right of standoff and stand-in, long range, and sort of within the close fight, the idea that the B-21 can penetrate allows it to operate across all of that space. It is going to be the backbone of our future bomber force, and we're very much looking forward to getting into the theater.
Fair to call it a badass weapon of war and peace?
Couldn't say it better myself, Senator.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rounds. Senator Manchin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, my congratulations, General, to you, and thank your family. And I just want you to know your unselfish service, sir, along with all the men and women in uniform, is what keeps us bipartisan, holds us together. You are the glue, and we appreciate that more than you know. With that, I'm concerned about the budget delays. I'm more of a budget hawk on this, but basically our CRs, the cost of a CR to our military, our readiness, and basically the value of our dollar. We've been asking for that more of an accurate cost to that, what type of punishment or what type of detriment it is to your buying power. And we've been told that basically since from 1991 to 2010, the delays for defense appropriations about 29 days. Since 2010, it's over 118 days. We've been also told that the American Enterprise Institute threw out a rough estimate of $200 million per day, $200 million per day, under the latest continuing resolution that covered the start of fiscal year 23. If that's accurate, that's a total of $18 billion. We're always asking for supplements. We always need more money for the military to do its job to meet the demands and challenges we have. If you can get me just an accurate figure, I'm sure that you all are able to do that. And that leads me into the other part of my question, was basically the position of the Chief Management Officer. I very much believe that the Department of Defense needs this person and give it the authority it needs to do the job, to have risk evaluation, risk assessments, where we stand, where we can better utilize the monies we have. We're fighting all the time to make sure our defense is the best equipped and best supported. But if we don't utilize the money that we have accurately and have accountable and auditing, I'm concerned about that and your commitment to that. And if you would support that Chief Management Officer, I think it'd be a tremendous asset to the entire Department of Defense.
Well, Senator, thank you. And first of all, with respect to the continuing resolutions, I will I have a note here. I will get back and see where we are on, with respect to the, sort of the exact number, but your estimations and those seem to be fairly much in bounds. I think the other thing that we need to be cognizant of is that not only those particular dollar amounts, but the times at which they happen. And I would say that right now is one of those more critical times where we are in the strategic environment with our potential adversaries and the advancing capabilities. I believe we've done some very hard work under Secretary Kendall's leadership through these operational imperatives to really refine and define some of the capabilities that we will need. And if we continue in continuing resolutions, or even worse, even if they're partial, or even if they're even worse cases where we can't have the predictability to make those investments, we're losing the one thing that money can't buy us back is time.
I know we're at the cusp of a shutdown, and we're talking about that, which we shouldn't even be on the table. Basically, it should be how we get our job done in the manner that we're supposed to. Let me lead to something much more concerning to me also, is the Ukraine war, especially our air war that we have, or lack of an air war. They've been asking for quite some time for F-16s. We've been reluctant. All of a sudden, we basically agreed. They've been asking for long-range missiles. We've been reluctant. They've been asking for Reapers to be able to deliver long-range missiles, long-range missiles that we haven't given them. Can you give me an evaluation of the air war that we have and what they're going to need for them to be successful? Because it looks like we're just kind of piecemealing it together and taking longer than needed for them to be effective.
Well, Senator, I will be happy to do a better evaluation and get back with you on the organized training and equip. I'm not as deep into the understanding of the operational
Delay of the
piece.
F-16s. Delay of the F-16s. Why did it take so long?
Senator, those are, again, those are policy decisions that
Okay.
were made in the context of an integrated deterrence
So
and
let me
other.
ask this question, if I may, sir. I'm so sorry because our time's running quick. Do you believe the F-16s will be effective and be helpful for them to have some air defense and air superiority?
Senator, thank you for that question, because I believe, first of all, the F-16 is a very, very capable platform. What we understand through our successes in air power and air superiority is it's not only the platform, but it's the training. And that training is not just on the platform, but it's the integration with the command and control elements, the integration with the joint force. And so, as with our Air Force, we're only effective if we're part of a joint force. So I believe the value of the F-16 will be in the longer term when it's better integrated with a larger Ukrainian military, as well as the symbol that it sends for the Ukrainians to be transitioning to more Western.
Long-range missiles be more helpful quicker and be able to be deployed quicker and be more effective? Or the Reapers that we've basically been talking about for quite some time can't seem to get in theater?
Senator, all of those are very capable pieces of kit and munitions, and I think the real value in understanding their value is going to be understanding how the Ukrainians might integrate those and how that works into their scheme of maneuver. But we do have very capable munitions and platforms.
Maybe we can meet later and you can get me more briefed up on the concerns I have. Thank you, General.
Thank you, Senator Maxson. Senator Ernst, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and General Allvin. Thank you so much for your time today, and congratulations on your nomination to you as well, Gina, and to your entire family. I know that you are going to be an effective steward for our Air Force and a strong partner to this committee. I will express today a concern that I shared with you in my office. First and foremost, it is a specific issue with the Air Force and the Air National Guard. When the National Guard's 185th Air Refueling Wing in Sioux City, Iowa, converted from its F-16 fighters to the KC-135 tankers, it was back in 2003. The Air Force said they would upgrade the airfield at the Iowa National Guard facility, and unfortunately, the Air Force and the National Guard have not followed through on that commitment. So what we need is that runway upgrade. They've failed to complete that, and I'm additionally concerned with this failure because we see a conversion now going from the 135s to the KC-46s. The flying squadron, the 174th Air Refueling Squadron, could lose its mission because they cannot convert to the new tankers. Not upgrading the runway will have a direct impact on retaining the immense talent of our guardsmen in Sioux City. And this really is unacceptable. The Air Force really should live up to its commitments. So the question for that, sir, is knowing that the Air National Guard is a part of the total Air Force, do I have your commitment that you will work with the National Guard to conduct a proper assessment for the runway upgrade for the airfield at the Iowa National Guard facility in Sioux City, Iowa?
Senator, you absolutely do, and I will tell you that the 185th is a fantastic organization that, they celebrated, I think, 75th
Yes.
year in 2021. So this is one, we're nothing if not a total force. I do commit to ensuring that assessment, that evaluation is done and in conjunction with the Air National Guard to ensure that we have understanding of cost, schedule, and performance for that particular initiative.
Thank you. And do I also have your commitment that you will work with the Secretary of the Air Force to pause any discussion on changing the 185th Air Refueling Wing's mission set until a full and proper MILCON assessment is completed?
Senator, you have my commitment now. We'll work with the Secretary of the Air Force on this.
Thank you very much. And you are absolutely correct. The men and women of the 185th are incredible. They have a great command team there, and their airmen are top-notch. So another issue that I spoke with you as well in the office is regarding our Air Force Special Operations Forces. As ranking member on the Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee, I am totally invested in ensuring our nation's special operations have the authorities and the resources they need to carry out their role in our nation's defense. So how does the Air Force Special Warfare community fit into your strategic direction to move the Air Force forward and transform?
Thank you, Senator. I'm going to watch the clock here because I could go on for hours
Okay.
on this particular
Go-
topic. I'm going to be
go
respectful
for
of your
it, sir.
time. But Senator, as we look at what the special operations community does and the manner in which they do it, it's very much aligned with how I see the Air Force needs to be in the future. We need to be having attributes of agility and lethality and resilience and survivability. And the AFSOC community and the special operations community in general, as they work in small teams, they work solving problems at the edge. They work on traveling light, on being smaller footprints, on being able to develop those relationships with allies and partners. All of those are part and parcel to a successful United States Air Force in the future. So there's much to be learned from the AFSOC community. And as they expand to the third power projection wing at Davis-Monthan, then I think we're showing that they are increasing their relevance in the strategic environment within which we find
Yes,
ourselves.
and General, with all of that being said, how important our AFSOF are, do you see any cuts coming to the organization in the near future?
At this point, Senator, in the current budget environment, we see that the only real thing we see with AFSOC is that expansion to the power projection platforms. As we look at across the entire board, we'll have to evaluate case by case, but there's not anything in this particular case where we see a specific cuts to AFSOC.
Okay, and as those are being proposed, will you come back to me and the committee and discuss any potential changes before those changes are made?
Senator, I absolutely will.
Okay, I really appreciate it, General Allvin. My best again to your family, and really appreciate you taking on the challenge of this nomination. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. Senator Kane, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. General Allvin, congratulations to you. One of my colleagues earlier in the hearing suggested that the problem with holds of military nominations was Chuck Schumer's fault. That's laughable. Senator Schumer has not placed a blanket hold on any military nominee during the entire 10 years I've been in the Senate. I don't think he's placed blanket holds on any nominees. I don't see that happening on this side of the aisle. And the attempt to blame the vacancies in these confirmed positions on Senator Schumer is embarrassing. It's laughable. It's laughable. Now, Senator Cotton, who was the one that raised it, said, oh, but Senator Schumer could call up a vote for the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff on the floor. That's true. We don't mind voting on people, but the implication is, why not vote on the top brass and just punish all the people below them? That seems to be the offer that's being made by the GOP. Vote on the top brass and punish everybody else. I remember one of my most memorable days in the Senate. We had a Senate lunch of all senators, closed door, and John McCain talked about his experience as a POW in Vietnam. And I'll never forget that. Some of my colleagues were there that day. Some have joined the body since then. Senator McCain talked about the day when the North Vietnamese figured out he was a big shot because his dad was a key leader. And they came to him and they said, we will benefit you because you're a big shot and let you out of the Hanoi Hilton. And you know what he said? No. I'm not letting you benefit the big shot, and I'm not going to get out of the Hanoi Hilton until you let every other hostage out who got here before me. Now, to me, that seems like what the military ethos is. I didn't serve in the military, but I had a son who did, and he always used this officers eat last thing. What, we're going to have votes for the top brass and just turn a blind eye to punishing hundreds of other people who are waiting? It's a punishment. It's a punishment. Why would we benefit the people at the top and cavalierly allow others to be punished? And so the offer that's on the table of, yeah, let's have a vote for a few people here at the top and allow all the others to suffer, that seems to be completely contrary to what I know the U.S. military ethic is. Trying to blame this on Chuck Schumer is embarrassing. Mr. Chair, I would like to offer the following articles into the record, articles that are appearing in foreign press in adversary nations, allied nations, other nations about the blockage of U.S. military leadership. And I'd like to offer the following articles. U.S. military hit by unprecedented leadership void. Russia Today, August 5, 2023. And there's more. Senator stalls U.S. military promotions and anti-abortion standoff. Al Jazeera, July 10, 2023. No truce over military blockade on abortion. Anthony Zurcher, BBC, September 8, 2023. The anti-abortion senator blocking the Pentagon, Ejercicio del País, July 13, 2023. U.S. Senator Tommy Tuberville blocks top U.S. military promotions because of abortion views. The National and the United Arab Emirates, July 11, 2023. U.S. Senator blocks hundreds of military promotions over reproductive rights. Sydney Morning Herald, July 12, 2023. And a final piece from CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Company News. Embassies unstaffed, military gaps, America's toxic politics spills into foreign affairs, July 25, 2023. I'd like to have all those entered into the record. General Allvin, one question. Pillar 2 of the AUKUS partnership encourages collaboration on a wide range of technologies between the U.S., Australia, and the United Kingdom. What role do you see for the Air Force in the AUKUS partnership?
Well, Senator, the role for the Air Force in the AUKUS will largely be sort of decided by the senior leadership of each of those three countries. I will tell you that we have several deep and integrated interoperability and relationships with both Australia and the United Kingdom. Airborne C2, some of the things, the opportunities for co-development of weapon systems, I think those are some of the opportunities as we look at some of the developments of the systems that I think will be largely AUKUS-friendly, if you will, whether they're bilateral or trilateral. I think there's lots of opportunities to advance with allies and partners.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back, but I just am recalling the heroism of our former chair, John McCain, today, and the fact that he would not let those who weren't VIPs be punished, even though it would have benefited him. And I think that's an ethic that we should all learn from. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kane. Senator Kramer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, General Allvin. Congratulations to you and your family. It's nice to meet Gina. This first opportunity I've had to meet a family member, but I'm going to take your word when you say they're, your quotes, amazing, incredible, wonderful. I'd just hang on to that part of the record, Gina, for a long time. Very good, very well said. I'm going to take some issue with what, or at least seek some clarification regarding your discussion with the chairman on the future of ISR and the transition, as you called it. You talked about maintaining readiness and keeping ready, and that you have this plan for a transition. And yet, I pulled out this week the three most recent budget overviews, and I see in fiscal year 22 under strategic context, listed as one of the 5+1 missions of the Air Force is continue intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Fiscal year 23, strategic context, Air Force core missions. Number 5, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And then I look at the 2024 budget overview, and there's no mention of ISR anywhere not a transition. There's a lot of other things, and the operational imperative, it has a lot of impressive aircraft. Am I reading something wrong, General? Is the Air Force trying to get out of the ISR business altogether to, like, this year?
Senator, absolutely not. If there's anything, that would have been a sin of omission. I would say that as we look at the ISR of the future, we're trying to transition to something that is platform-centric to something that is system-centric. Because if we focus on ISR as we have in the past, sometimes those platforms are a little bit more vulnerable rather than how they can approach the system. But this transition will be one where we have to, and we've had conversations on this about make sure that we maintain, to the extent that we can, the capabilities throughout this transition as we leverage what we think can be more persistent, accessible, survivable, and connected. And that's why we're looking to leverage more with our Space Force partners as the entire Joint Force is becoming more and more reliant on not only the airborne layer, but the spaceborne layer of ISR as well.
So I've had a number of Space Force officials like yourself sitting where you're sitting, and they're pretty clear that the transition's a ways off before they can take it and run with it as the exclusive platform. The transition has to involve something other than keeping the last 9 RQ-4s flying, which at this point 2 or 3 I think are capable of flying. Is there a transition in place for new aircraft?
Well, Senator, there is the idea of being able to leverage some of the platforms that are we can talk about at this classification level and some that we can't, as well as some of the other domains that we want to integrate the data to be able to have that ISR, fused ISR. I think when we look at the opportunities that are there through all sorts of intelligence that can be fused together to gain that situational awareness picture, we will be looking at trying to manage that risk until we get to that future leveraging all of those platforms, whether they be the RC-135 version or some of the maintainer of the RQ-4 or some of the other sensors that we have that can put together this picture.
I want to move on to something else you and I have talked about, and that's collaborative combat aircraft. And I've been reading a lot about it. There just happens to be a lot of articles in the last couple of months about it, and you know, we're having more and more discussions about it. And of course, the Air Force's plan to come up with some sort of affordable, rapidly adaptable, sometimes heritable, right, aircraft as a force multiplier. We've all seen, I've seen several of the companies that are, and what they're looking at in a contribution. I am worried, though. I'm worried, even though we talk a lot about new acquisition formats and rules of the road. And I also worry a lot about the traditions of going back to the same old place, the same old congested airspace, where innovators go to CYA instead of to innovate. And I've seen a lot of the Air Force come up with a lot of great new ideas for 2 or 3 years, and then, oh, they're after the newest, greatest idea, and pretty soon the other one gets dropped off. We've spent a lot of money. And I happen to come from a place that has really great airspace for new innovations. I come from a place where a base that you know well, although you haven't seen it lately, and I can't wait to show it to you because, as you know, part of that base is now a private sky park, where Northrop Grumman and General Atomics and others are testing and remote piloted aircraft, obviously training pilots from all over the world, not just our own. Where now TMCI is outfitting old RQ-4s to help us better test hypersonic missiles. And yet the future of the base is uncertain to me. And I just would love to hear why Grand Forks wouldn't be a better place than the desert, other than the sunshine and the proximity to the ocean, for something like a CCA, where real innovation takes place on both sides of that fence at that base.
Senator, I will tell you, we're not committed to a specific location. What I will tell you is that integral to our force design of the future, we are committed to collaborative combat aircraft. They are defining one of the core elements of what we believe the Air Force needs to do in the future, which is better human-machine teaming, which is better having affordable mass. And the location, I would say we're not committed to the desert at all, and I certainly do appreciate the value of Grand Forks, and having been there as a squadron commander, I certainly look forward to coming back, I believe, next month.
Well, let me just stress, for the people that like the sunshine of the desert and the proximity to the ocean, that a lot of future wars could be fought in the Arctic and in very, very cold places. And I just think we have an awful lot to offer, and you and I are going to talk a lot more about it, and I'm going to stick around for another round if we get the opportunity, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Kramer. Senator Rosen, please.
Well, thank you, Chairman Reed and Ranking Member Wicker for holding this hearing. And General Allvin, I want to thank you. We had such a great meeting last week, and for your willingness to serve, and of course for your family, because all of us know we can't do any of these hard jobs without the people who love us and support us. And so I'm going to talk about a little bit about what we got going on in state with a lot of sunshine, and maybe there's a little desert, maybe it's close to the ocean, but I want to talk really about the C-130J basing, because the Nevada Air National Guard's 152nd Airlift Wing in Reno flies its legacy C-130s in some of the hottest temperatures, highest elevations, and in the most challenging mountainous environments of any C-130 unit. Integral to their mission is flying the Modular Airborne Firefighting System, the MAFS, in support of the U.S. Forest Service as we see those wildfires year after year. So upgrading the Nevada Air National Guard's C-130H fleet with C-130Js would really have a substantial impact on their readiness, on their firefighting capabilities in Nevada and the western United States. Like I said, we have seen devastating wildfires. This really matters to all of us. And so I appreciate that Air Force leaders followed through on their commitments to me to update the basing criteria to now include specialty missions like MAFs. I'm excited that Reno's under consideration for the latest round of basing decisions. General Allvin, can I have your commitment to work with me to ensure that our 152nd Airlift Wing receives the C-130Js so they can more safely and capably carry out their dangerous mission to help fight those fight the wildfires, in Nevada and throughout the western United States?
Senator, first of all, I'd like to echo the bravery of the air crew and those who support them on that mission. That is a dangerous mission, and they take that on with bravery and courage every single day. And so hats off to those fantastic airmen of the National Guard that do that. With respect to the basing decision, yes, ma'am, as you said, the Nevada Air National Guard has made the cut for the candidate location, and that final decision for the preferred location, Secretary Kendall has delegated that to the Director of Air National Guard, and I anticipate that should be out imminently. I will endeavor to continue to dialogue with General Lowe to find out when that ultimate decision will be made. But, I mean, congratulations on moving into that candidate location and being under consideration. And I will continue to dialogue with General Lowe.
Thank you. And I want to also ask for your commitment that the Department of the Air Force will strongly consider location and missions served in particular regions of the country, like we just spoke about in Reno, when making your basing decisions to ensure that our Air National Guard, all around the country, that they're best equipped to respond to the kinds of emergencies in their region.
Thank you, Senator. I will.
I want to go in the little time I have left. We talk a lot about childcare, and we had a great discussion there. Airmen stationed at Creech Air Force Base, they have an incredibly difficult time finding adequate childcare options because their shift schedules, they pilot those MQ-9 Reapers, we know that, and they fall outside of the normal business hours given the 24-hour operations they support around the globe. So your in-home childcare fee assistance pilot program, it was launched to help the in-home childcare solutions for service members in the region with exceptionally high demand. We know the pilot program was expanded to include Las Vegas. However, I've been told by our airmen and women that the program has so much red tape, it's so cumbersome, the requirements, that the program is essentially unavailable to the many Nevada families who desperately need this service. So how do you propose that we fix this problem? Because their mission isn't changing, and we have to give them that peace of mind of affordable quality child care. Our military families, you know this, we need that.
Senator, thank you for that question, because I think what often goes unnoticed is the idea that for many, child care is a readiness issue. Especially you bring about the point of those brave folks at Creech who actually are employed in place and are taking on highly stressful missions and then go back home. But they're still just as dedicated and work just as hard, and the hours are tricky as well. And so they may not have access to the standard child development centers that others who work sort of the day shift would, as you will. So to your point about this in-home child care, Senator, you have, if confirmed, you have my commitment to continue to work to try and cut through some of that red tape, because I find it heartening that there are families out there who are willing to open up their homes and be subject to the certification to ensure that there's the safe care of the children for those who might be, working at night. That is something somewhat selfless of those who are volunteering. So my pledge is, if I'm confirmed, I will work with the OSD and see how we can maybe streamline that to ensure that we can meet both the needs as well as the willingness for those potential homes to be able to support that.
Thank you. Our families and our country will surely benefit. I'll submit some questions for the record on housing at Nellis Air Force Base for our airmen and women there. I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Senator Tuberville, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, thanks for being here, and congratulations. You and your family had a great talk the other day, and you'll do an outstanding job. Had a chance over, and I told you this, over the last month to go down to the War College and see General Andrea Tullis, who does an outstanding job. She allowed me to speak to all 1,500 colonels and majors, and that was a treat. I mean, what leaders we got in this country. That was awesome. We also discussed politics, and hopefully when you take this position over, you'll do your job, stay out of politics, leave that to Secretary Kendall. The one thing that has concerned me since I've been here for 3 years, and even before that, we decided to build a new tanker, and we still are not in rapid deployment of that. And, it kind of concerns me that we just can't overcome problems like that within this committee. But that being said, politics continues to take over. One thing I want to talk about is I've had several calls over the last 6-7 months from generals in the Air Force. In recent years, our sorties have decreased to 1.5 a month. And Chinese have increased theirs to around 4 a month. Now, being from a coaching background, I know practice makes perfect. And what's your thoughts about that? We've got to be ready to fight. And 1.5 sorties a month doesn't sound like a whole lot to me. Now, you know more than me.
Well, Senator, reps and sets, that is important. And so ensuring our readiness to be able to meet the challenge is certainly one of our priorities. One of the challenges that we have along with that is with our flying hours program, which is, we don't have flying hours, you can't put the pilots in the cockpits, is the challenge is we continue to have the legacy system, so we only have so many dollars to spread across. And when you have reduced aircraft availability rates because they're old and they're finding new and interesting ways to break, and they break for longer periods of time, and they stay in depots for longer periods of time, that removes them from the ability to be able to be flown. So that's one of the challenges that we have. Also with some of the maintainers that we want to fly to maintain these new aircraft, we need those wily, cagey maintainers to keep fixing the old ones. So some of that skill set that we're looking for seasoned maintainers to transition to some of these 5th-generation platforms have not been available to us. And as they say, if you want a 10-year maintainer, it takes 10 years to build that. So if we can't have access to those because they're still maintaining the legacy platforms, and also those legacy platforms have supply chain issues, all those sort of things that make it just less efficient, which is another reason as we are looking to manage the readiness of today and the readiness of tomorrow, that we have that challenge to be able to meet the needs while still being able to advance to the modernization that we need.
So you're saying this is not a policy, this is a cost problem, an airplane problem, maintenance problem. This is not a policy that we have to cut back to 1.5 sorties a month. Are you saying that?
Senator, what I would say is where policy could help is as we try and pursue our modernization strategy, if we could have less restrictive language that will allow us to move that along, we will continue to try and manage best the risk of maintaining the current legacy platforms and moving into the new platforms.
So you being in the Air Force and being around it for a long time, how many sorties do we need a month to really be prepared to fight somebody like China?
Senator, there's a great phrase in the weapons school that says, it depends, and I know that's not a satisfying answer, but if I could maybe talk about what it may depend on. We have revalidated throughout our Air Force over the past 18 months, we have revalidated what we call our mission essential tasks. Moving from 20, 30 years of counter-VEO fights, understanding the nature of the environment in which we're going to need to fight in the future, we've revalidated those tasks. Understanding how well we do on those tasks tells us how many sorties we're going to need. We're also moving into a world to where, when I was flying, it was, if you're in a simulator, you weren't getting that much training. You need to actually be flying. The advancement of the synthetic environment and the ability to work in some of the key mission areas without actually being in the cockpit changes that equation as well. So I would say I do believe we could fly more and be better, but to give you a precise amount, I think would be probably folly, because there are other elements with respect to mixing it with the live virtual constructive environment that will help offset the need for pure airborne flying.
Yeah, there's nothing like actual experience, and I think you'd agree with me on that. And, I just hope that, we're ready and willing and ready to go. And I don't know the difference in the airplanes. I'm sure there's a difference of sorties in terms of the F-35 and all the different versions we have. But again, thank you for what you do. I wish they'd bring you to the floor today. I'd vote for you to be confirmed. Hopefully that happens in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Tuberville. Senator Warren, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Allvin, congratulations on your nominations. Gina, it's good to have you with us today. So as chair of the subcommittee on personnel, I want to thank you for your leadership on behalf of airmen and their families, and particularly your support for military family housing and making sure that families have access to child care. I appreciate your focus on these issues and how important they are on both recruiting and retention, and how much leadership you have shown in this area. For nearly 9 months now, the senator from Alabama has personally blocked the Senate from approving promotions of more than 300 military leaders. These are all leaders that Senator Tuberville voted for here in committee. But the senator from Alabama is angry about a Pentagon health care policy, so he's decided none of the leaders can take up their jobs, the jobs that are needed to maintain our national security. The Air Force has the most senior officers who've been trapped by Senator Tuberville. General Allvin, does this block on promotions for top military leaders help or hurt our ability to recruit and retain service members, particularly in fields like cybersecurity, where we're fighting hard to try to get the best talent?
Senator, I will tell you that while we don't have specific hard data, my experience and my personal judgment says that this does hurt recruiting and retention. We hear anecdotal evidence. First, we have great airmen who are going to go out and do the mission. And those who are serving in the positions, whether they're acting or they've deferred their retirement, they're going to continue to serve with honor. And so with that, I could not be more proud. What I do think about, and again, without more than anecdotal evidence, is the signal that this may send. And with that signal, understanding that if there's a perceived disruption or distraction by our force, we want to maintain and retain the strongest and the best in our Air Force. And if those best have other options and their families have other options and they see this as a potential distraction, then we run a greater risk than if these weren't in place of losing those. And so that's the sort of the retention concerns that I have. And as people look, and if they see disruption and distraction, we want to make sure we're also an employer of choice. And so I think anecdotally, I believe it affects us in both of those areas of recruiting.
Okay. So you're saying we focus on the 300-plus people who are directly being blocked, but you're saying the impact is felt far beyond that in retention and even recruitment, potentially.
Senator, I believe it could potentially, just because they see it as a distraction to the normal way of doing business.
Okay. So the senator from Alabama has said that blocking all top-level promotions does not have any impact on our national security. That was not the view of the NATO leaders in Brussels when Senator Blumenthal and I met with them just a couple of weeks ago. They shared serious concerns about the impact of the blockade on our NATO operations. General Allvin, if U.S. leadership in NATO were to wane, would that be a national security concern in your view?
Senator, it would. If U.S. leadership in NATO were to wane, I believe it would, and I think we need look no further back than the Ukraine war and how we're able to act as a responsible ally and sort of shore up and improve what I believe is the alliance's response to that. And I believe so if our influence in NATO waned, I believe that would be a national security issue.
Okay. And when I met with NATO leaders, I heard concerns that leaving so many senior positions unfilled is leading our allies to question our commitment to NATO. I'll be blunt. The actions of the senator from Alabama have become a national security nightmare. Instead of trying to embarrass the United States in front of its allies and trying to embolden our enemies, the senator from Alabama should lift his holds and let our top military leaders do their jobs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Senator Budd, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's just remember that Leader Schumer can bring all these wonderful nominees, highly qualified nominees, to the floor for a vote. And rather than being here having this discussion, it's an important discussion, we could be here voting and moving these nominees through. And also, Secretary Austin could change this with the stroke of a pen. By this afternoon, we could have this resolved if Secretary Austin would revert to the historical policy that we've had for decades in the Pentagon. But General, good morning. Thank you, and congratulations on your nomination. I really enjoyed our conversation last week. Congratulations as well, and thank you to your family, Gina, and your 3 children who have served right there with you. So we thank them as well. You know, in the conversation last week and many of the conversations I've heard this morning, there's a concern about joint force readiness. So let's talk about that just a little bit more. In a growing fighter capacity gap and the threat posed by China, both in the near term and in the long term as well, General. So given budget constraints, the Air Force has decided to divest to invest. That is to divest aging aircraft that you've mentioned this morning in favor of investing in research and developing of future platforms like the B-21 and next generation air dominance family of systems. So do you agree with that overall strategy, General, yes or no?
I do.
Thank you. So divest to invest doesn't come without significant risk, particularly when it comes to fighter and intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance, or ISR capacity, given the growing threat posed by China, and before these systems come online in the early 2030s. So I'm interested in ways that we can mitigate that risk to ensure that we're both ready today and better prepared for tomorrow. So talk to me, if you would, about ways that we can accomplish both modernization and improve current readiness rates. We talked a little bit about this in my office last week.
Well, yeah, Senator, thank you, and I also very much enjoyed that conversation, and specifically the joint aspect of it, because I think as we understand how we're going as an Air Force, we need to make sure that's in concert with our joint partners, because there's also ways we can mitigate risk across the joint force. But Senator, to your point, specifically on how we might be able to mitigate the transition as we move from where we are to where we need to be. There are tough choices ahead, there's no question about it. However, as we look towards doing some smart things, such as, I would say within our bomber fleet, obviously we're working on the B-21, but we've got a B-52 that's likely to live to be a centenarian. And it's because we're looking at, can it operate in the environment that it's used to operating in? Can it still be relevant? And how do we make it relevant? So as we do that, we want to look to take those that we can't find a relevance for in the future and look to divest those to be able to reap those savings. However, as we look to the future and air superiority, that's why we were speaking earlier very briefly about collaborative combat aircraft. We have to find a way of having affordable mass. The ability to do air superiority and the ability to function in the Indo-Pacific in a way that is not cost prohibitive. And that's why the faster we can get to some of these modernization initiatives like CCAs, which we are absolutely focused on, the shorter that sort of vulnerability period is and the more we can mitigate that risk with the resources that we've been given. And if I'm confirmed, I commit to continuing to work and have that dialogue back and forth with this body on that.
Thank you, General. Just yesterday, Secretary Kendall said that given combatant commanders insatiable appetites for forces, that we should exercise strategic discipline and prioritize deployment of ISR platforms and other forces to maintain readiness. Do you agree with Secretary Kendall?
I do agree with that, and understanding the context within which we've had conversations on that. That context is that when we ask for ISR, I think they're used to asking for it in a certain way with a platform. when in fact, what is the capability that you need? What is the situational awareness that you need? And can we provide that in a different way? And when he says that they have an insatiable appetite, it's not meant to be pejorative. It's with an understanding that if I'm that combatant commander, I have a certain area of risk that I have to buy down that as well. And so I would be asking for that as well. And so it's with an understanding of that tension and maybe a way to break through that.
In recently reported remarks, Admiral Aquilino, commander of INDOPACOM, he stated that his metric for success is the ability to find, fix, and finish 1,000 targets within 24 hours. I appreciate that clarity. With the Air Force divesting significant numbers of the platforms needed to do that, how can the department improve its readiness and posture to ensure that it can enable the Indo-Pacific with the forces necessary to accomplish such a vital task in the event of conflict?
Senator, thank you for that. I would say, in brief, if we are to seek to meet that goal of finding, fixing, and finishing 1,000 targets, we are not going to be able to do that with our current capabilities. It is only with transitioning to platforms that move as part of a system that we're going to be able to scale and keep that situational awareness with networks that are resilient enough to where you don't have a single point of failure and you can recover and self-heal and still be able to prosecute those targets. That's not the capabilities we fully have today, but that's what we envision being able to transition to in order to meet Admiral Aquilino's and our department vision for having that speed and scale.
General, I wish you luck. Thank you, and again, your family.
Thank you, Senator Bud.